Hi everyone. Chapter 16 of Book 1 of the Discourses by Epictetus is called On Providence. And so, actually about 10 chapters back in chapter 6, we also had another chapter called On Providence. And he makes a very similar argument for his view of, providence. In both of these chapters, and I did a video on chapter 6 and discussed a bit about that, so I won't necessarily go into that whole discussion again, other than to say, his idea of providence is really divine. And so he speaks of providence in divine terms, and it almost sounds like creationism, where he presents like a divinity has established the natural order, and it's a stagnant thing that was created in this form by this divinity. And it's basically perfect in the way that it works, and so the case of a human is to figure out that natural order and follow that. So this is not really our view of nature today, because we have couple of thousand years more information about our natural world around us, and so we have now a more understanding of evolution and the continual sort of flux and change of life on Earth in all of its forms. So Epictetus brings up he really makes 2 points in this discourse, in this chapter on providence, and really all three of them, are not that compatible with my modern sort of worldview, because he makes the case that the first case he makes is that non-human animals have been created for service. They've been created to serve humans, and they can be very controlled very easily, and like sheep, and they've been created for this purpose, to give us milk, etc. And I don't feel like non-human. I feel like that is not a good explanation for non-human life on Earth. Given what we know today. And then the second point he makes is also sort of troubling, in that he talks about the distinguishment of the sexes of male and female, and that the divine providence, this divinity, gives men a beard, gives men hair on their chins, but not women. Women are softer and have a softer voice and don't have hair on their faces. And the reason why he gives that men have this hair on their faces, so that when you see them coming, they're a man, and you need to treat them as such and address them as such. So this does not really fit with a modern, with my modern view of gender at all. And then the third part of the discourse is then about how perfect this divinity has made everything, and that we ought to be able to recognize that, and we ought to therefore spend our days and nights, singing praises and thanks to this divinity for having created this world that we live in, such as it is. So, I really have these first 2 points, this othering of animals, othering them into a non-human, really created solely for the use of humans, and no more regard needs to be made from them. I have a real problem with. He actually says at one point, so also nature has made the creatures that are born for service ready and prepared and able to dispense with any attention. Meaning, you don't have to pay them any attention at all. So he doesn't see them in his moral view at all of how they are to be, how humans are supposed to interact with, or how humans should interact with non-human animals in a moral way. He dismisses them as a moral force, completely. And that to me is, it's not, it's a very limited moral view of both humans and non-humans, actually, based on what we know about non-human life on Earth and human life evolving alongside and with non-human life that we know now. That, granted, he did not know in his day, so he was working off of the knowledge base that he had in his time, but we have different knowledge today, so we are able to come to a different conclusion on that. And likewise with the discussion on gender, where women are really othered. I mean, this is a blatant example of making women into an other, and that is, they don't have hair, so when you see them coming, they don't have hair on their face, you can basically dismiss them because the only thing you're looking for is a beard, and then you address this person as a man. So this is, what we would probably call now othering, women. And so I think both of these instances are a really good lesson, I think, to remember when we're reading an ancient writer like this, that we can't approach this knowledge dogmatically, that it is some sort of truth. We still have to read it through the lens of our modern life, and we have to be able to take from it what's useful for us today, and be able to then dismiss what's actually harmful, because I would actually say his view of non-human animals and his view of women is actually harmful to, not just not correct, but harmful to a modern Stoic, a modern Stoic who's attempting to cultivate a life of virtue and a moral life, with a life of morality and virtue combined with inner tranquility, that it behooves us to expand our view of non-human animals and to treat them accordingly. And likewise, not just women, but there are various gradients along the gender roles where not all men want to have beards, not all men. So there's different ways of being male, and there's different ways of being female in our world today, and this is part of the beauty of our world today, in my opinion. This is what I would why I would reject these couple of examples that he gives in this discourse. The third point he makes, I think, there's a way to transcend. Which is the third point he made in this discourse, was about how since this divine providence is so perfect and so has created this natural order that's so sublime, that we should spend all of our day, in praise and thanks to this divine being for creating this natural order. And, having, in my view, not really needing to have a divine providence, any sort of divinity outside creating a natural order for me, I don't necessarily need to spend my days in praise and thanks to this being. But I think it's important to recognize how this can also be interpreted to transcend your current state of nowness and transcend your state into sort of an all-encompassing, all cosmological, knowing, or cosmological being, not a separate being that's in separate intelligence necessarily, or maybe we could even say it has a separate intelligence in that it is the sum of everything that's going on, natural forces, the impact, conscious forces like ours, consciousness and consciousnesses of the other animals on the planet and the other life on the planet, can combine a sort of like a universal consciousness, So, but this sort of transcending, the individual and transcending into the greater cosmology, and connecting with that is, an important part of developing inner tranquility to me. So I can do that though without coming at it from the standpoint of a divine providence who has created this sort of static natural order. So I hope that made sense. So this is the second time he's talked about divine providence, and both times, I sort of had a similar view on the discourse. So I hope you found that somewhat interesting. The next chapter is chapter 17. It's called That the Processes of Logic Are Necessary. So that should be interesting. So stay tuned for that. Catch you soon. Bye.